Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Canine Cannibalism. Today, we are going to be taking a look at The Wasp Factory by Iain Banks. Okay, this book is 184 pages broken up into 12 chapters. I'll give you a quick blurb. Frank, our protagonist, is nuts, his father's nuts, and his extremely nuts brother just escaped from a hospital and is on his way home. The Wasp Factory, stored in a hidden corner of the attic, promises fire, and Frank promises blood to any who dare try to spoil his island. Yeah. This is not extreme horror. It's not adjacent to extreme horror. It's not adjacent to being it's adjacent to being adjacent to extreme horror. I don't know why. Well, that's a lie. I know why this is talked about so much on the subreddit, in other circles. It's because there's animal abuse in it. There's a lot of animal abuse in it. Pretty graphic animal abuse. Not extreme horror. There's a lot of books with animal abuse that are not extreme horror. Not extreme horror. Closer to splatterpunk than extreme horror. Not splatterpunk. Not bizarro. Not really alt-lit. It's kind of alt-lit. It's really weird. The cover says a gothic horror story. I would say that's pretty accurate. It's very gothic in its tone, but not extreme. Barely disturbing. So confused as to why this ever gets talked about in those circles. Again, I'm not actually confused. I know exactly why, but yeah. I'm kind of torn whether to even put this on the shelf of all of my extreme horror books, because it's not even... I mean, I guess if I put The Road and Blood Meridian and The Lost by Jack Ketchum up there, I guess I can put this up there, but this is like less extreme than something like Blood Meridian or even The Lost. It's about... it's a little less than The Lost. We're going to be doing all the normal shit in this video. We got a content sample to go through. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, it's essentially a trigger warning. It's a little more robust. It's more of like a novelty item kind of thing. I just tell you all the gross shit, and you can just be like, ooh, that's disgusting that's in that. Fucking blood and guts and fetus fucking? I don't know. Not in this book. We're going to be doing a review and ratings, general review and ratings, a plot summary, and then we'll be done. So, without further ado, we're going to get into a content sample for The Wasp Factory. If you were to pick up a copy of The Wasp Factory by Iain Banks and read it, you would find all of the following. You got death, child abuse, including child physical abuse and child death, animal abuse, including animal physical abuse and animal death, and there are some generally filthy scenes. Sweat, off, kind of gross descriptions of people's genitalia. And that's it. So, not extreme, not disturbing. Decent book. Not extreme, not disturbing. We're going to get right into our general review / ratings now. If you are unfamiliar, I take a series of aspects for a given book that you could give to a given book, and I rate them on a scale from 0 to 10. These first numbers are rated on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is really bad, 10 is really good, 5 is completely mid. Nothing wrong with it. It was there. I barely noticed it. 4. The Wasp Factory by Iain Banks. Your plot and plot direction is going to be an 8 out of 10. This book is a very interesting look at insanity on a bunch of different levels, or psychological illness. It's normalized, but we're going through the book from the perspective of a narrator, protagonist, whatever, who is, by most definitions, psychologically very unwell. And everything that's insane to us is very normalized to him. And it's a very interesting look. And it's not like perspectives of extreme horror protagonists where they're like, oh yeah, I killed this guy, and it's normal to them, but it's still described very violently. This is like keeping animal heads on sticks and worshipping skulls on altars and having weird contraptions that determine the death of insects. It's very odd and psychedelic and psychological, and it's normalized to the point where I don't know if there's a term for this. I talk about it a lot. There are things in this book that are treated as colloquialisms, and they're not really fully explained until much later in the book. They're treated as so normal that they don't need explaining. I don't know if there's a term for that. It happens a lot in sci-fi. They give you a sci-fi term and you're like, what the fuck does that mean? But it's used normally within the society, so you have to infer it, or it's explained later. There's situations like that in the book, and I think it's done quite well. The main character in the book cares a lot about symbolism. There's a lot of talk about symbolism in the book, and there is a lot throughout the book outside of the character's own perspectives on symbolism that seems to be symbolic. That's supposed to be symbolic, I think, to a reader. But I have no fucking idea what any of it means, really. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm fucking infallible, but I'm usually pretty decent at literary analysis, understanding themes, foreshadowing, repetition, metaphors, that kind of thing, symbols. And there's a lot of stuff in this book that feels like it was put in specifically to be symbolic or a metaphor, and I have no fucking idea what it means. And I'm 50 to 60% certain that's just me falling short, maybe not understanding something, because this book, I believe, was written by a British guy, and the book is written entirely in British English, so very UK coded. Or it was written by the book takes place near Scotland, I think. So Scottish guy, whatever, from the UK. And I don't fucking understand some of these things that are mentioned and seem to be symbolic, but don't seem to have any actual symbol to them. The last chapter of the book I found to be kind of problematic. It's after the climax, as you would probably guess. After the climax of the book, there's a big reveal about a part of the identity of the main character. And the last chapter is literally our main character sitting down and psychoanalyzing himself, talking about why I do this, why I did this, what this means to me now that this reveal has been made. It legitimately just reads like a fucking professor who read the first 11 chapters of the book and then wrote a paper analyzing the themes. But it's the 12th chapter of the book, and it's the protagonist doing it. I've seen some praise online for that final chapter, talking about how it's the best part of the book, and personally, I don't get that. I get it. Some people are very into that literary mumbo-jumbo kind of shit in a book, which is perfectly fucking fine. It does not work for me. It legitimately, to me, feels like this kid read the first 11 chapters of the book and then wrote a paper about them. And it's still within the plot of the book. It doesn't necessarily take me out of the plot, but it just feels so unnecessary and cold and clinical. And on top of it, on top of the fact that it still somehow feels cold and clinical, there's something about the reveal that's about their body. And the character keeps making dumb jokes and puns about the disability, the body problem that they have. That was in the reveal, and it's so stupid. It's stupid. It's dumb. I think it's dumb. It's dog shit. It's dog shit. I think it's dog shit. Yeah. So anyway, that's a 8 out of 10. Overall, it was very good. I really did enjoy the plot. Your tone is going to be a 7 out of 10. It was really fucking weird throughout. There were some very, I don't think psychedelic is the right word, but it's kind of the best way to describe it. It's just very weird. Some very weird scenes. It's very depressing and dreary, even if the main character isn't necessarily depressed or in that kind of mood. Just the landscape, emphasis on the grey of the Scottish coast. Again, I believe it's there in Scotland. Gothic horror. So I thought the tone was done very well overall. Your characters and character development is going to be an 8 out of 10. The main character was very interesting and was done very well. You're going to probably hear me use that word a lot, by the way. I think interesting is really the best way to describe a lot of the parts of this book. But the main character was very interesting. His personal relationships, his friend and his family, his brother and dad, very interesting characters. fleshed out pretty decently, in my opinion. He was definitely fleshed out. We got a lot of time in his head, looking through his eyes at past events, future events as he sees them. Your grammar and typos is going to be a 5 out of 10. There was one typo that I noticed. You normally see that more with modern self-published works, so it's kind of odd to me that there's a typo in this book that was written in the fucking, I want to say the 80s? Yeah, the 80s. And was produced and was published by an actual company, as far as I can tell. But it's a 5. One typo does not a bad book make. Dialogue, 5 out of 10. I didn't really notice it. It was a menagerie of different UK accents. Some of it got on my nerves. I've complained about that a lot before. There was a character at one point who spoke in a very, very thick accent, and it was very difficult to understand at least one of the lines that they said, and there were several others I had to reread multiple times. You've heard me complain about that before. It's really not that big of a deal, especially in this book. It's really not that big of a deal. It kind of added to the charm in certain places, but overall the dialogue was absolutely serviceable to the book. It was perfectly fine. It was a 5 out of 10. Your prose is going to be a 7 out of 10. Parts of the book read like a prose poem, and I found that very interesting. I thought it was done very well. It's very poetic and flowy, and I really do think poetic is the best way to describe it. Not just the prose itself, but the way the plot happens throughout those sections. It's just kind of flowy. It was limited. It's not like the whole book was like that, but there were a lot of rhetorical devices, figurative language, whatever, that were very poetic. There's also some stylistic capitalization that produces the effect of, I don't know how to describe this. It makes you, in my experience, it made me feel like the character was more childlike, which for the character, that actually does make a lot of sense, in my opinion. The capitalization of things like the word run, in instances where you should not capitalize that word in order to make it seem like a big thing, like a thing larger than the speaker. It got across the effect that the speaker is, or the narrator is, childish, and I think that worked quite well. However, towards the end of the book, it stopped being used as much. Again, this is another example of something that may have been symbolic in some way, but it doesn't seem to me that the character was maturing, so I'm not entirely sure why that stopped being used so much. Towards the beginning, and this may just be because this is when we were introducing all of these new concepts, which did retain their stylistic capitalization throughout, there was a lot of it, and I do somewhat feel like it was not just the things that retained their importance throughout that were continuously capitalized stylistically. And then as it went on, it tapered out. And I don't fully understand why. Again, maybe that's just the effect of how the book was formatted. I don't know. It doesn't really fucking matter. Yeah, so that was a 7. Personal enjoyment, that's going to be a 6 out of 10. Sorry, I just realized my light was off. 6 out of 10 for the personal enjoyment. I mostly enjoyed it. This was a fun little read. Honestly, this was a fun thing to sit down and read. There was one really disturbing scene involving an infant, and there was a lot of animal abuse. And overall, the book was very fun. Not for those reasons. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be reading so much extreme horror if I didn't get some form of personal, weird, morbid satisfaction reading awful things. But the book, I liked the book. I thought the plot was good. I thought the prose was fun to read. Generally, it was a nice little read. Again, it's only 184 pages, so in terms of similar books that I review on this channel, not the longest thing ever, but certainly not the shortest thing ever. Yeah, that's about it. So we are now going to jump into our plot summary. Heavy spoiler warning. As always, I should just fucking keep holding the book up. I would recommend you go and read The Wasp Factory by Iain Banks. Form your own opinions. No plot summary is ever going to get across the entirety of a book. Tone, prose, yada, yada, yada. It's just not. As always, I rearrange some of the details, some of the reveals, etc. I take out certain details that you technically could include as major plot points in a summary, simply for my own ease when it comes to explaining the plot, and then also to make sure that if you were to go and read this after having listened to my plot summary, you would have a very different experience. So there will be a link in the description, as there always is, to where you can go and buy that book. And without further ado, we're going to get into it. Frank, our protagonist, is a 16-year-old boy living in a house on a little island cut off from the mainland by a small river. When he was born, his father was a hippie, and because of this fact, he doesn't exist according to the government. This is never fully explained, and this is another thing I think is meant to be symbolic. I kind of have a few inklings as to what this may symbolize or be a metaphor for, or whatever the fuck you want to describe it as. He's like a free spirit kind of thing, but it's never fully explained, and it's never even fully explained why. I just assume that the dad's a hippie and is like, fuck the establishment, and so never got this kid papers from the government, hid the birth or whatever. He was homeschooled, or the protagonist was homeschooled by his father, who took extensive pleasure in filling his head full of half-truths and lies. He is disabled, having been savaged by a dog at a young age, the result of which has left him without testicles and with only the stub of a penis. He refers to it as a disability. He's not physically like unable to walk or maneuver himself or whatever, but he's disabled in a sense. This he hates, as it puts him closer to the likes of women, whom he hates even more. He's very, very misogynistic. His father is an eccentric, covering all areas and objects of the house with sticky notes describing different measurements of said areas and objects. For example, the capacity of umbrella stands, the areas of curtains, etc. It sounds very OCD-esque to me. His brother Eric was a well-to-do young man who went insane after an unfortunate incident in a teaching hospital involving a disabled child and some fly larvae. He took to burning dogs and trying to force local children to eat worms. He is now in an asylum. But Frank is sane, or so he says. He spends his days repairing the sacrifice poles dotted around the island with new animal heads, worshipping an altar containing the skull of the dog that savaged him, and ritualistically sending live wasps through the Wasp Factory. The Wasp Factory is a small constructed edifice of 12 doors over the face of a clock, each of which leads to a specific kind of death for the wasp, and each of which implies a different inherent meaning. The factory is not to be trifled with, for it is deity of the island and house just as much as Frank. Frank has also killed 3 people. He killed his cousin Blythe, or Blith, I don't know, that's a very UK name, at a young age after the relative torched his pet rabbits with a makeshift flamethrower. He killed his younger brother Paul after he realized that the boy was infused with the spirit of the old dog, and he killed his cousin Esmeralda simply because he killed 2 boys and felt that he had led to an uneven number of men and women in the world. It's highly implied that Frank has something similar to symmetry OCD, describing how if he brushes his shoulder against something, he has to brush the other shoulder against something. Eric escapes the asylum he's being held in and begins frequently calling the house, shifting and jumping from placid and normal to manic and psychotic. Frank uses the Wasp Factory to twice get premonitions, and both times the factory promises something to do with fire. Eventually, Frank's father picks up the phone and has a conversation with Eric. He gets extremely drunk after this conversation and accidentally leaves his keys within Frank's reach, at which point Frank uses them to get into the study he has always been barred from. There, he finds male hormones and tampons. He confronts his father. It turns out that Frank was born Frances, Frances, a girl. After being attacked by the dog, her father saw it as an opportunity for an experiment to rid himself of female presence in his life. He raised Frances as a boy, dosing her food with male hormones. She has all the proper sex organs of a female, albeit an enlarged clitoris, which she mistook as a stump of a penis. At this time, Eric attacks the house and attempts to set it alight. He is stopped at the last second by Frank. The book ends with police arriving and with Frank finding Eric hiding out nearby before entering a deep reflective period, which is the last chapter and is just a fucking literary analysis of all of the motivations and emotions that Frank has had throughout the book. And that's the end of the book. And actually, that's the end of this review. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I read all of my comments. I will drop you a like, drop you a heart, and reply if it's applicable. As always, my opinions are my opinions and my opinions alone. do not take what I say as gospel. Read the book yourself. Form your own opinions. I would highly recommend you pick up a copy of The Wasp Factory by Iain Banks and read it. There will be a link in the description as always. Form your own fucking opinions. Always good shit. And yeah, I think that's it. And as always, be calm, be smart, and go with love.